Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns 24/7, joined as always by our fearless leader, the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes. Taylor, how's your Super Bowl week?
Hey, Chip, it's going well. How about yours?
I mean, I love Super Bowl week. I
Yeah.
used to cover this game when I covered the Cowboys in the NFL for the Dallas Morning News. And I always used to joke that it was a series of concerts wrapped around a football game. But and we'll get to this as part of our conversation today about the Super Bowl. But I'm into it because of these quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I'm a Lions fan, so I've been following Matt Stafford when no one else was following him, like watching all those, passing touchdowns and fourth quarter comebacks. And then Joe Burrow. You and I saw him up close in Austin
Yeah.
in the national championship season. He 3rd and 17. That's all you need to say to any Texas fan when it comes to Joe Burrow. And that guy has been every bit as cool as he was that night in Austin as he has been for the Bengals this season in his first full NFL season.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, you know who deserves credit for some credit definitely for, spotting him was Tom Herman when he was at Ohio State. Tom
Yeah.
Herman really pressed Urban Meyer for Joe Burrow. And, Urban Meyer wasn't too fond. Well, the story goes Urban Meyer wasn't sold on him and Tom did. And then, obviously Tom did not get to coach him at Ohio State because he got the head coaching job at Houston. But, oh, Tom, I mean, talk about spotting a talent that a lot of people weren't looking at. And I just love Joe Burrow's his drive. There was a clip of him from high school that popped up on social media. I think it was like last
Yeah,
week.
the state title game he
Yeah,
lost.
yes. And just seeing like you saw the raw competitor in him and how fiercely angry he was and upset over losing, in the state title there. And so I love those type of competitors. And so he's an easy guy to root for too. I
Yeah.
think at least. Now that he's not playing Texas, I think Texas fans could say that he's probably an easy guy to root for.
Yeah. I mean, what he did down 21-3 in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And you lead the comeback. Now, Patrick Mahomes, your defense came up with a couple interceptions, but my goodness, nothing rattles him. That's for sure. If the Rams get up, they need to be wary of Joe Burrow bringing him back. So that wouldn't surprise me either in this game to see the Rams make a couple plays, maybe get up a couple of scores, and then all of a sudden maybe they relax a second and here comes Cincinnati. I think it's going to be a close game.
Yeah. Do you ever miss? I mean, I remember you used to always talk about the Super Bowl was a really cool thing for reporters to cover because you cover the game, at least back in the day. I don't know if it's like this now. And then afterwards, they essentially throw a media party where the media gets to watch the game back. Do you miss, being able to do that type of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, everything about the Super Bowl is big, right down to what you just said. So the media send all your stories in. It's like 1 a.m. and you go to this big banquet room and they have a huge spread, or at least they did pre-COVID, of great food, roast beef, prime rib, shrimp, all the fixings. And then they show the game again so you can actually watch it instead of having to work it. And everyone stays. I mean, it's a really cool thing. Obviously, they have, refreshments there and stuff, but yeah, the NFL, the Super Bowl, they do it right. Everyone knows Radio Row and all the guests that come in. I mean, it's just, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. If you can sneak into a party, great,
Mm-hmm.
but that's about the only thing I miss, actually,
Really? Yeah.
from covering the NFL. Because I've said this before, unless you're covering a winner, NFL players do not want to see you coming. Like for
Right.
that hour of media availability that the NFL requires in the locker room every game week for 1 hour, they go hide in the training tub.
Right.
And there's like, okay, we're losing. There's nothing good to talk about. So
Yeah.
that's why I always love covering college athletics, because every 4 years you get a new wide-eyed group of freshmen who are still willing to tell their story and have their story told.
Yeah, well, every year, technically. I mean,
every year, right?
as if
Every
you
year.
get access to the freshmen, I've always loved that about covering college. There's always new, and not just 7 draft picks or whatever it may be, that come in every year. It's 25 new guys that whose stories you can tell, and there's been some cool stories that I've at least covered, and I imagine Chip has covered some amazing ones in his century-long career covering college football. But just kidding,
Thank
Chip.
you. Thank you.
Just teasing.
Yes, appreciate that. All right, so we'll get back to our man Trey Hopkins in a second, but obviously the news, the football news, and we had it right here at Horns 24/7 is the possibility of David Cutcliffe, um, the offensive coordinator to Peyton Manning at Tennessee, the head coach to Eli Manning at Ole Miss. Oh yeah, and former Duke head coach could be hired as an analyst at Texas, joining Gary Patterson. And Taylor, the reason I introduced him that way is because everybody knows Arch Manning, quarterback in the 2023 class, son of Cooper Manning, is, that whole family is incredibly close to David Cutcliffe. So that it's an interesting development for a lot of reasons. People will talk about, oh, well, he's a incredible quarterbacks coach and offensive mind. He's also 67 years old and probably ready to, you know, retire at his lake house. But we'll see if this comes together. Your
Yeah.
thoughts?
I mean, it's smart, right? If you think about it, this is, as you mentioned, I mean, this is a guy who's probably at the latter portion of his career. I'm not necessarily sure that he's going to be looking to, land a big time head coaching job or anything, at his age. Maybe he will. I don't know. There's not a ton of people out there that would want to start over and start fresh as a head coach like that. There's a few, maybe like the Mac Browns and Nick Sabans, but his relationship with the Mannings. I mean, this, when we started hearing this, my first thought was this is genius of Steve Sarkisian. Absolutely genius if he can land this guy, because there's no denying that, Arch Manning obviously is the main person that pretty much any college in the country would take in the 2023 recruiting class. Texas has been really doing a solid job at recruiting Arch Manning. Keeping that relationship fresh and everything. And this only adds the lure, I think, to Arch Manning coming to Austin potentially, knowing that this is a guy that not only just coached his uncles, Coach Peyton Manning, Coach Eli Manning, but developed them into all pro, MVP, NFL MVP type of players. And for a player that is like Arch Manning, that has his ceiling, his skill set, his bloodlines, everything lines up to him, potentially becoming that next great Manning quarterback in the NFL. Why wouldn't you want to go play for, or be associated with, I should say, the coach that helped your uncles become what they were and develop them from there? So this is a genius move, in my opinion, if Texas can get this secured. But what's your take on it, Chip?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and I honestly, I think if David Cutcliffe comes on board, I think it's, to me, it's a little bit of validation that Arch Manning is interested in Texas, because I think David Cutcliffe also works as a sort of, um, inspector of the Texas program to report back to Eli and, well, Cooper. Okay, dad. Let's get dad
Right.
first, and then uncles. Eli and Peyton. But you know, Texas needs to get it going in the right direction, right? Otherwise, David Cutcliffe isn't going to have much to report back to the to the fam about whether Arch should come or not. I just find it fascinating because um, you know David Cutcliffe is a firebrand. I mean, I don't want to say he's set in his ways, but he's a confident guy. He's not going to change for anyone, not at 67 years old, not after being a head coach for the last 13 years at Duke. he's going to tell it like it is. So I think this is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and if he tells it like, I mean, there's only so much he can tell as an analyst, right? There's really only so much analysts really do when they are on coaching staffs. I mean, they assist a lot, no denying that, but it's not like he can be out there coaching the quarterbacks or anything along those lines.
But
But
he's in those coaches meetings.
he is, yes,
So, he'll know if the dynamics of the staff are good, and he'll
yes,
be listening to their diagnosing what went right and what went wrong from week to week. And if he thinks that they're on point, he'll feel good about it. If not, he'll be like, huh. You know
right,
what I mean? I
yeah,
I just find it interesting because I know how these things work. Um, it cuts both ways, right? Hey,
right,
we're gonna get to Cutcliffe in here. We're gonna treat him great. Everything's gonna be great. He's gonna have nothing but good things to say to Arch. David Cutcliffe, you can't butter him up at this point. I mean, it'll be um, a good, smooth, forward progress football program while he's here, and he'll feel good about it, or he won't. So,
yeah.
but that information will be going back to the Manning compound.
Yeah. Well, and I do think the one thing that Steve Sarkisian, the staff already has a pretty solid relationship with Arch Manning and with Cooper Manning and the Manning family. Um, there's a reason why Texas is in the mix with him. That's not just some coincidence or anything like that. It's not that he grew up a diehard Texas fan and that's why they're in the mix. I mean, Steve Sarkisian and staff have done a really good job, I think, at keeping that relationship alive and keeping him really involved in the recruiting process. I mean, we've talked before about when Quinn Ewers came around, that was not a surprise, I don't believe, for the Mannings when he did come to Texas. And I think that, sure, obviously, if something detrimental goes down inside the coaching room and meeting rooms with coaches and David Cutcliffe's there, and he may report negatively back. But I do think that it doesn't hurt from the side of the fact that the Mannings already have that established relationship going forward. It's not that Texas is hoping that David Cutcliffe is going to bring the Mannings in and help them develop the relationship. That's already there. So it's unique. It's a unique situation. And if it works out, it could work out in a big way, I think, for Texas. But as you mentioned, Chip, if there is some sort of questions about the staff or anything along those lines, it could hurt them. But I feel like at this point, I feel like Steve Sarkisian's a pretty intelligent guy when it comes to his staff moves. And I can't imagine him bringing in a guy that he would think could potentially impact, a recruitment as substantial as Arch Manning in a negative way. I feel like if there was any question about it, this would not be even on the table right now. So, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
not
giving too much benefit of the doubt. I don't know.
yeah, no, I mean, the only way it would ever be negative is if the program isn't buttoned up behind the scenes.
Right.
And that's all I say. I mean, 5-7 season, what happened? Things need to get going in the right direction, right?
Hmm.
And that's all I was saying is that Cutcliffe's going to see it. If he comes, he's going to see whatever is happening behind the scenes, and you hope it's positive, right?
Yeah.
You hope the program's moving forward. This great recruiting class, Gary Patterson, all the momentum, and that whatever gets reported back is great. And that's what Texas fans are hoping. They're tired of whatever this last season was, and not even a bowl game. I was going to make fun of a lower bowl, but they weren't even in a bowl game. So, that part of it just needs to get going in the right direction so that there's nothing but positives to report back to the Manning compound. So, it's going to be fun. We'll keep you posted, obviously, right over there at Horns 24/7. And winter workouts continue for the Texas football team. And all I'm going to say is read this week's Insider when it hits your laptop or phone Thursday morning for an in-depth look at a player who very well could be in the conversation for biggest impact in the 2022 recruiting cycle.
Okay.
So there you go.
That's a good teaser, Chip. I will say that. That's a good teaser. I know what he's talking about. I'm not going to give it away, but that could be a lot of different things. So,
Yeah, and it's people like it when I do stories like this, and so I would say if you're a fan of college football, you want to read this one. All right, Taylor. So we'll touch on the Super Bowl before we get to Texas basketball and that huge win over Kansas and what it means. The Longhorns will have a representative in the Super Bowl for a 17th straight year, thanks to Bengals center Trey Hopkins. If you're a member at Horns 24/7 and you follow the Brew, my daily column, I wrote about Trey Hopkins and his improbable journey from undrafted free agent who got cut twice by the Bengals so that they could sign him to their practice squad after signing him to a 3-year contract as a rookie. He went from making like $300,000 to making barely $100,000 on the practice squad. But he stuck it out, kept getting better, kept doing all the right things, and they signed him to a 1-year deal. Injuries happen. He gets to start at 3 different positions on the offensive line. His best position was center. And then they sign him to a big, nice 3-year, $20 million deal to be the starting center for the Bengals. So Trey Hopkins, of course, this is fascinating to me, Taylor. Half the NFL is undrafted free agents.
Yeah. That's
How about
crazy.
that?
That's crazy to think about. I didn't know that.
We make such a big deal out of the draft. And obviously, there are incredible players who were taken, like both these quarterbacks, number 1 overall, but then half the league is undrafted free agents. So, and Trey Hopkins, what a story. I talked earlier about how he went up against Alex Okafor. Alex Okafor was a, third round draft pick,
Mhm.
always had contracts, big $450,000 signing bonus with the Arizona Cardinals, and won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs a couple years ago. And because of Trey Hopkins' last contract, those two have made the same amount of money, and they were 1 year apart. Alex left Texas 1 year before Trey Hopkins. They played together for 2 years.
Right.
So, kudos to Trey Hopkins. Now, Taylor, this Super Bowl, everyone's talking about how not so great the Bengals' interior offensive line is going up against Aaron Donald, Ashawn Robinson, Von Miller, and Joe Burrow, who was sacked 9 times in a playoff game against Tennessee. They still won because Ryan Tannehill threw 3 interceptions. Um, that interior line against the Rams, I mean, on paper, that matchup alone should ensure the Rams win because they should be able to make Joe Burrow uncomfortable. Thoughts?
I mean, I'm not going to count out Joe Burrow. I mean, look at, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. Look at what happened in the Kansas City game, with the Bengals. I think that, Joe Burrow, while there's no denying that, yeah, that's an unfavorable matchup. And that would probably be an unfavorable matchup against many NFL
Yeah,
teams out there, not just, this isn't knocking Trey Hopkins or the Bengals offensive line. I mean, that this is an unfavorable matchup against pretty much any NFL offensive line.
fair.
However, not every NFL offensive line has a quarterback with the confidence and the coolness, I guess you would say, as Joe Burrow. I mean, people talk about the ice water in your veins type of guy, and that's kind of how Joe Burrow is. I mean, I think it's hilarious that his nickname is somehow Joe Cool, but that's exactly the type of demeanor he has. I think he's a pretty humble guy, which makes it easy, in my opinion, to root for those type of guys that are the humble, not going to be the flashy showboats, but he wears, a turtleneck and people are like, oh, he's so cool. It's like,
Well,
okay,
and
he's a turtleneck.
well, in the playoffs, he debuted that JB diamond crusted
Yeah.
necklace, and he said, "I make too much money for these to be fake." And I think he felt weird saying it, but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a fascinating story. They were what, 4-12
Mhm.
last year, and he went out with a torn ACL. And in his first full season as an NFL starter, he's turned one of the true sad sack franchises in the NFL because the Brown family won't spend money.
Mhm.
And now they did spend a little bit in free agency, and it really improved their defensive line, starting with DJ Reader from the Houston Texans. Um, he's a star, and why the Texans didn't re-sign their own draft pick. They drafted him in like the 5th or 6th round. It's ridiculous, but teams won't spend money. And so the Bengals have this reputation as being cheap, and they, mistreat their incredibly loyal fan base because they don't go, spending money to bring in all kinds of free agents. Well, you spend a little bit on free agency on defense, and then boom, you bring in Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor, the coach, who I'll give him credit. Last year, he kept saying, "We're going to be a playoff team. We're going to turn this whole thing around." And people were like, "You might get fired,"
Yeah.
And here he is. He looks like a prophet. I mean,
Right.
he said it just as maybe he was spending more time with Joe Burrow in his rehab and getting to know him and see it coming. But yeah, Joe Burrow special. Let's see
Yeah.
how it's special.
For sure. And we can't forget, I know that he's not currently playing, but Joseph Osai is also on the Bengals. He's been out all year with what was a knee injury, I
Yeah,
believe it
IR.
was. Yeah. So, but he is still a part of the Bengals roster. So, if you're a Texas fan, I think that there's at least two players you can root for in this
And I'll
Super
say
Bowl.
Osai, that was a great draft pick.
Oh yeah.
That was a great draft pick because the guy will do everything on special teams. He'll develop into a top NFL linebacker and if he's watching Von Miller, he'll learn how to use that long arm rush and lean and just blow by people. But
And Joseph
yeah,
Osai is a very special player. Like, I mean, you're not. It's gonna be a cold day in hell before you hear me say anything negative about Joseph Osai, the football player. He
yeah,
uh, just great kid, great story. Honestly, the fact that he didn't grow up playing football. Comes from Africa to United States. I mean, just everything about him. Like, I just really, really always respected Joseph Osai and just his quiet uh, kind of approach to everything, but he was such a monster. I mean, you'll never question if he is giving his all. You'll never question if he is all in or, maybe has like 50-50. No way. Like when that kid hits the field, he's going to play 110% every play. And Texas fans did see that, especially in his junior season before he went to the NFL. But I hope for his sake and Trey Hopkins' sake too, that the Bengals can pull this out, Chip, because shoot, I admitted last week I forgot that Trey Hopkins. I don't watch a ton of NFL. I'm going to preface it with that. Just in football season, the college football take over our lives basically. And me and Chip a lot of times record podcasts on Sunday, and it's just not a lot of time to watch it. But I forgot that Trey Hopkins was on an NFL roster, let alone going to be on a Super Bowl roster. So, I feel like I
way to
need
go,
to.
Trey.
I'm sorry.
Way to go, Trey.
Yes, exactly. Trey, we're going to root for you because I forgot about you and I apologize for that.
Number 66, and you can't miss him because his hair is down to like his, middle back.
Yeah.
Um,
Different than he did when he was at Texas.
yeah. So here's a little nugget I picked up. Cameron Dicker, who was at the Senior Bowl last week. If he doesn't get drafted, keep an eye on the Cowboys.
Oh.
Just saying. All right. So Texas basketball, Taylor. I was there Monday night for this game against Kansas, and it felt like the dam was about to break over and over and over again, especially when they're down by 4 with a minute left, and you're going, uh-oh. And then, you get the Trey Mitchell banked in 3, and you're like, uh-oh, okay, maybe there's a miracle about to happen. And then Kansas kind of fumbles a ball on the other end, and then they leave Timmy Allen wide open at the free throw line. Marcus Carr's driving towards the basket, sees Timmy, just dishes it to him, wide open shot from the free throw line to put Texas up 1. And then Marcus Carr drains a couple of free throws. Ball game. I mean, down 4 with a minute left against Kansas. Texas finishes the game on a 7-0 run, and they get their first signature win of the season, first signature win under Chris Beard. And it could not have come at a better time at home. And now we'll see if this is sort of the validation that this team has needed to totally give in to their coaches and do whatever the coaches want and maybe elevate heading into March.
Yeah, and we talked, Chip, last week on the Flagship podcast about, Texas had the Saturday game against Iowa State, and then follow it up with Monday against Kansas. And our love it or leave it question, I forget exactly how we worded it, but essentially that those were make or break type of games, and Texas needed to win at least one of them. And the fact that they won both, to me, Chip, that could be the turning point, as you're kind of pointing to. I mean, it may be too soon to say that. We'll obviously know a little bit more this weekend with Texas, heads to Waco to face number 10 ranked Baylor. But still, there is no denying that Texas absolutely needed some positive momentum moving in their favor. They got that against Iowa State at home last weekend, and then they added to it against Kansas. And with any sport, as you want to see week to week improvement, you want to see game to game improvement. And I think that the fact that Texas was down by 4 with 1 minute left, as you had mentioned, and was able to crawl out of that, not just against any team, but a top 10 ranked team in Kansas. I mean, that they're the highest ranked team in the Big 12, I believe, right now. So the fact that they were able to take down them, when especially at this time of year and on this time of the schedule, where we are sitting there questioning, is Texas going to be a bubble team come March? And, this was a huge momentum booster, I think. And it's going to be intriguing to see how they use it to their, hopefully you would hope, at least if you're a Texas fan, use it to their advantage, moving through the month of February, because it's going to be a tough month for Texas basketball. There's still a lot of games on the schedule and a lot of tough opponents that they're going to have to face. But
Well,
that
yeah,
was
and how
so
about
huge.
Chris Beard doubling down on Texas being a Final Four team, Final Four contender in the post-game press conference after beating Kansas? Chris Beard would not have said that a week ago, 10 days ago, but after that win, he says, I still think we're a Final Four type team, even though some outside our circle don't think that way.
Yeah. Coaches
And
don't say that if they don't believe it.
right.
Not at this time of the
So,
year, especially. No chance.
right.
Month
So,
out from March, no way, you know?
right. You can either be speaking it into existence and hoping your players hear it, start to believe it, or that's the kind of confidence you're building in your team behind the scenes. Now, I got to say, and I wrote about this in the Brew about Christian Bishop, who's just been phenomenal. 6'7", wiry. He's not going to blow you away with his size and strength. He's a wiry, athletic, good bounce, basketball player who's been averaging 17 minutes a game. The last 3 games, including that loss to Tech, he was one of the few Longhorns who was ready from the beginning, was aggressive, going into the hole and bringing it, going to the free throw line. He has averaged 5 offensive rebounds per game. People want to know how Texas beat Kansas when Kansas shot 58%, and the game was played in the 70s, where Kansas, the highest scoring team in the Big 12, wants it. Everyone would think, oh, Texas, if they can't keep this in the 60s, they're not going to win. Here's how they won it: with 19 more shot attempts than Kansas, and they came because of extra effort, hustle plays, offensive rebounds by guys like Christian Bishop. And he's doing it so frequently. We talk about Brock Cunningham being that energy guy off the bench. Christian Bishop does it all the time as a starter. And he doesn't score much, but
Right.
he creates possessions for other guys to score. That's why I'm like, how can you take him off the floor? I get that you're going to substitute and you're going to mix and match, go 4-guard lineup, 3-guard lineup. But the one guy who never comes off pretty much is Timmy Allen. And now Christian Bishop needs to be added to that list. And Marcus Carr is obviously the point guard. But that's how valuable Christian Bishop has been the last 3 games. And to me, he's how you're going to beat bigger teams. He's athletic and smart enough to kind of Wile E. Coyote his way to the ball against bigger guys. I'm so impressed. And I think you're watching a player peak right now that your team needs to take on his personality and go.
Yeah, you need those kind of the grunt work type of guys, the ones that aren't gonna be the top of the points list,
The
but
Dennis
going to
Rodman types.
exactly, the Dennis Rodman types of guy, for sure. I mean, and he had, I believe, 7 offensive rebounds against, Kansas, 10
Yeah.
total. That you need that. You especially when you have a team like Texas that obviously I think defense is the identity of the team, but scoring and shooting and a lot of that has been up and down. And if you have that consistent type of guy that's going to continue to keep the ball in the offense's hands and distribute it to guys that are going to take the shots and make it, I mean that only helps. I always love those type of players. I loved watching the Bulls when Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan were there growing up. I just absolutely loved it. And my favorite player a lot of time, Michael Jordan was my favorite player. He's my first crush ever too. But my second favorite player was Dennis Rodman because it's like you just need those guys that are going to do the dirty work for you, and that's what I think you're seeing with Christian Bishop, Chip. And I am really curious. Were you on the court when the fans rushed the court after the Kansas game? Did you go down there?
No. So, yeah, I was still in my media seat, which is like right behind the students in the mezzanine. We used to sit on the floor, but now we're just in the end zone, which is like the worst view of a basketball game. But yeah, it was a scene. I mean, the students came pouring onto the floor, and there's a great energy. Obviously Kansas, so the building was, full or near full. But he is building that relationship with the students, and I wrote about this in the Brew this week. When the new Moody Center opens, the students are going to surround the court. The first 10 rows are going to be students, and then there's going to be like an elevated walkway before you get to the next row, and that elevation is going to allow the students to stand the whole game and not disrupt, the old blue hairs behind them who want to,
The wine and cheese crowd.
wine and cheese crowd. So fear not, Texas fans. Chris Beard is going to get his students right on top of the court, create that atmosphere. I also wrote about the fact that there are no fans in their seats when the football team comes out
Yeah,
because they're all down in that tunnel lounge. I mean, of course, you're going to want to be right next to the team when they're coming out of the tunnel,
right.
because that whole thing is like the Cowboys, where the fans can sit there in the Miller Lite Lounge and watch the team come out for the game and tell their friends and shoot it on Instagram. So Del
The
Conte's,
important stuff, right?
yeah, I mean, Del Conte took full blame. He said Drew Martin told me this would happen, and I just didn't see it, and it's here now. He's like, please, people in those club seats, be in your seats when the team comes out. We need your energy there, not down by the tunnel. Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, a part of
But
me
it looks terrible, Taylor,
it
on
does,
TV.
yeah, the optics of it looks bad, and especially with last season, Texas had a lot of afternoon games where it's blazing hot, I mean, it's Austin, Texas. This isn't Southern California where you have a, 3 o'clock kickoff and it's beautiful weather. This is 3 o'clock kickoff. You've been sweating through your clothes for the last 6 hours if you've been there, and so I don't blame them for wanting to get shade. Part of me wonders though, Chip, is I mean, I don't know how this would work because it would have to be a capacity situation. They couldn't, obviously go over capacity for fire, reasons or whatnot. But I almost wonder if there's a way that they could kind of be like, you can either choose to be in the club lounge or you can choose to be in your seats. But if you're not going to go to your seats, we're going to give those seats to somebody else, almost like a free for all. It's like you. And I know you probably can't do that, and but they have to find some solution there
Right.
because the view, the optics of it surrounding it looks bad. It looks like nobody's there, even though they all are there. That's
I mean, they're going to have to, they know who sits in those seats. They're going to have to reach out to them personally. And they're probably going to have to incentivize them to be in their seats and not down in that tunnel lounge.
how much are those, like the donor? Do you know what the amount of donation for those seats are? Because with any season ticket holder, at least at Texas, you have to donate a portion
Yeah, I mean,
money
it's
to it
it's
before
it's
you can.
more than just the normal season ticket. I know that. It's not like anywhere close to suite
Mhm.
membership, but it's a little more than what the season ticket holders are having to pay in terms of their, contribution to maintain their season tickets. So, I
Maybe
don't
maybe
know.
that's how you leverage it. Be like, "Hey, we notice you're not in your seats. If you wanna keep these seats, you're gonna have to pay a little bit more," or
I
something,
mean,
Either get in the seat or you're gonna pay more of a donation. I don't know how that works.
yeah. Well,
This is why would never. I think Crystal Conte does a fantastic job as an athletic director, but I do not envy him for his job. I remember I think it was last football. Yeah, it would have been last football season. Chip, I think you were there, but I was talking to Jeff Howe before, and I was looking on Twitter, and Crystal Conte, pregame was like at least an hour before kickoff, was tweeting, answering questions from fans, and I like nudged Jeff Howe, and I was like, okay, so we know what Crystal Conte makes, and I'm looking at his Twitter right now. If you had the opportunity to switch jobs with him, would you? And he was like, hell no. I was like, me neither. It's like, it sounds great to make $1 million a year, but oh my gosh, like the amount of pressure and everything that athletic directors have to do. It's one of those where you're like,
2 million.
oh, 2 million. Yeah.
He got a raise because USC tried to hire him twice.
Oh yeah. He probably, I think, is worth more than that, but he makes that money to answer these questions. So they're going to have to definitely answer that. Hopefully they learn their lesson. There won't be a situation like that with the Moody Center or anything like that moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. So there's your good news, bad news facilities update. Good news, students are going to be around the basketball court in the Moody Center. Bad news is, how do we get those fans back to their seats when the football team comes out of the tunnel?
Yeah.
All right. The UT women's basketball team is in a 3-game losing streak as we record this, and their next 2 games are against teams who beat them earlier in the year, including Texas Tech, who's got a losing record, both overall and in conference, and came into Austin and thumped Texas 74-61. One of the worst games the team it played. And look, the young nature of Vic's team, they're going to play up and down to the competition. So they see Tech with a bad record, but it's Tech. Tech hates Texas. You got to know that history. And then they play OU. And this is very reminiscent of the Tennessee game where they had it won and let it get away. I mean, even the Baylor game last Sunday, they were up. Texas was up, 5 at halftime, played great in that second quarter, and then just acted like the game was over at halftime. But so it's a young team. They're playing really well, but they got to answer this week big time because you're in a 3-game losing streak. You lost to OU at OU. It's forgivable, but not really, because you probably should have won that game. And then you lost twice to Baylor in 3 days. That's a veteran team Kim Mulkey built. Baylor's the team to beat. Everyone picked Baylor in the conference. You're forgiven. You got to win against Tech, and you got to win the home game against OU and get back on track, and then take this thing forward. All right, Taylor, you ready for some love it or leave it? Unless you had some
No, I
thought.
mean, I wanted to get your take on Vic Schaefer's comments after the Baylor game. He kind of ripped, I saw a lot of media members that were at there, Vic Schaefer kind of ripped some of his players, saying that, the veterans players are not doing what they're coached to be doing. And then he took, the blame on himself too. I think it kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. What was your take on his?
Yeah, he was hot, and really he was singling out one senior. There's only 3 seniors, and he loves Joanne Allen Taylor and Audrey Warren, who are his, senior leaders and do everything right. And he was singling out Lauren Ebo, the 6'4" center who, got beat down the floor, turned the ball over a couple times at a crucial point in the fourth quarter. And he said, she's still trying to do it her way and not my way. Well, her way ain't working. I mean, he was hot, and it stings, but he's got to be careful. You always have to manage your emotion level with your players. It can't mean more to the coach than it does to the players, because that's when the disconnect starts to happen. It becomes more about, the coach sometimes than about the player. Now, everything Vic says and does is right. Now, to meet those demands, especially as a young basketball team with 7 newcomers, but he said, I'm not going to change the way I coach. I'm going to coach this group, even though they're young and inexperienced, as hard as I coach the teams that I took the national championship game. As long as he's upfront about it, the players are being told, and he's, he says all the time, I'm not for everyone, but I'm for the people who want to be great.
Yeah.
So I love Vic. I hope he's not burning too hot. We'll find out, obviously, because this team looks like a young team at times.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. You ready for some love it or leave it?
I am. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a really short break, but stay tuned because more football and basketball talk continues here on Love It or Leave It. So stay tuned. We will be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on here. Chip, you ready for some love it or leave it?
You know what, Taylor? I totally blew it. I meant to say one thing about the UT baseball alumni game last
Okay,
Saturday.
yeah.
Dylan Campbell. Whoa. I mean, he batted 189 last year and he started 12 games and can play anywhere. But 4 for 5 with a 3-run home run playing for the alumni team because he's a backup against the varsity, which are the
Mhm.
starters. And he goes 4 of 5. I mean, he ripped Pete Hansen, he ripped Tristan Stevens, and now granted, he probably sees those guys a lot in practice, but 4 of 5, 3-run homer. And he's a guy who's competing for the DH position. And I'm told he worked with Troy Tulowitzki on his hitting in the offseason. And if that's any indication, oh boy, you're looking for who's going to replace Zach Zubia's offense and Mike Antico's offense and Cam Williams' offense. I mean, if it's Dylan Campbell, that would be outstanding because everyone was talking about how short, compact, and simple his swing is now. And it's like, oh man, he might have figured something out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm ready for.
Okay. Well, also speaking of baseball, real quick, if you missed the Flagship interview podcast this week, definitely tune in. We had Ty Harrington, the 20-year head coach, baseball coach, at Texas State and a former Texas Longhorn. He did a fantastic preview of Texas baseball, which is the preseason #1 team leading into the season, which starts on February 18th against Rice. So if you're a baseball fan, definitely tune into that. He gives a really great in-depth breakdown of what he likes about this team, what he sees this team becoming, and his thoughts on David Pierce and what he's been able to do at Texas baseball. So definitely worth the listen if you have not tuned into that.
Great plug.
Yes,
Great
you did
plug
a great
right there,
interview
Taylor.
there. So, all right, with that, let's get to love it or leave it. Chip, my first one for you is love it or leave it. The possible hire of David Cutcliffe would be a home run hire for Steve Sarkisian.
Man, it sure looks like it. I'm gonna love this. As I said, I mean, I think it's if David Cutcliffe comes on as an analyst at Texas, I think it's a small indication that Arch Manning is interested in Texas. I don't think David Cutcliffe would go to a school where Arch Manning might not, I don't know. I could be dead wrong, but I just get the feeling that that's a little indication that Arch Manning is maybe interested in Texas. Uh, like I said, it could be clueless, but I do think that, as long as the program stays on the momentum track it's been on since going 5-7 and seemingly winning every, headline since then I think it's a great thing. Cause like I said, whatever's going on here behind the scenes is going right back to the Manning compound because that's how close David Cutcliffe is to the Manning family. So I'm gonna love this right now. Taylor, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna love it. And when you're saying you think it's a sign that Arch Manning is in, Texas is in it. Arch Manning did recently eliminate Clemson from his list. Texas is still in there with Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss, but Texas is definitely in the mix here. And I do think that if David Cutcliffe does come to Texas, it only helps, at least in the immediate future, only helps Texas and further chances with Arch Manning. I do think that the Longhorns though still are in the mix. If you missed the Stampede this week, Mike Roach did a really good 2023 primer and position breakdown of some of the key targets. And obviously, it's no secret that Texas is all in on Arch Manning. I mean, they're not recruiting really any other quarterbacks right now in the 2023 class. because I think that's a sign that they do feel pretty confident right now in where they stand at this moment. So, I think adding David Cutcliffe could be the something that could help Texas seal the deal in the long run if it does pan out that way. There's no reason for me to think if David Cutcliffe does come to Texas that it won't pan out that way right now. So I think I'm going to have to say that I love it. And I think that this could be, a difference maker type of analyst hiring, I will say, for Steve Sarkisian. And look, Chip, he learned from the best. He learned from the coach that essentially became the former fired head coach's factory at Alabama and Nick Saban. I mean, my goodness, Steve Sarkisian himself, Kyle Flood himself were those coaches that came in to, coach for or as analysts for Saban, then ended up getting the, on field coaching positions. But yeah, I think that Steve Sarkisian, I think he's talked a lot about the coaches he's learned from, with especially Pete Carroll and Nick Saban. And I feel like this is kind of a vision of what he's trying to build at Texas. Essentially, is what Nick Saban has done at Alabama, and luring in elite former head coaches that may have been fired, or even whatever, maybe position coaches too. I don't know. I mean, it's still kind of fresh and young right now in Steve Sarkisian, but I think this is a good sign for where I think it's maybe a good indication of where Steve Sarkisian really wants to build that analyst program too, not just from the Arch Manning perspective, but with him adding Gary Patterson to the mix, and then potentially David Cutcliffe. I think that's a good sign for the future, and I think it's a good sign that Steve Sarkisian probably took some of the key aspects of Nick Saban as a head coach that are more behind the scenes and is trying to bring it to Texas. And if he can do that successfully, then not saying Texas is going to turn into Alabama or Nick Saban or anything along those lines, but I think that's a good indication of where his head is and what his vision is for the football, staff, even if it's not coaching staff. So yeah, I'm going to have to love this one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about, you bring up Del Conte. I'm thinking about the guy he replaced, Steve Patterson, and how Patterson wouldn't even approve the football team getting a new sports coat, shirt and tie and pants every year, that they should only get one.
Didn't Charlie pay for those?
Yeah, Charlie ended up paying so
Mm-hmm.
that, he's like, these guys' bodies are changing from year to year.
Yeah.
Anyway, to now see the money being spent on this program, that's where Texas should be. And then heck, their fans are gonna kick in a whole bunch more on these NIL initiatives, including the latest, the uh, left field
Oh,
foundation.
Occupy Left Field
Yeah,
Foundation.
Occupy left field foundation, which is going to be a 501c3 that relies on fans contributing, $20 a month to help every baseball player on that roster get $10,000 for making charitable appearances. So, Texas fans are stepping up.
Yeah.
The Pancake Factory, the Clarkfield Collective, the Burn Ends program, Taylor, just to name 4. And I think more are coming. All right. Love it or leave it, number 2.
All right. Love it or leave it. The Texas basketball team cleared a mental hurdle in beating Kansas and now will start peaking.
I hope so, as long as they play Christian Bishop some more minutes while he's grabbing every offensive rebound, for crying out loud. I don't know how Chris Beard takes him off the floor. No, I'm kidding. I think there's a chance, because I saw, and it's night to night, but the best lineup on the floor from my end zone seat in the media seating at the Irwin Center Tuesday night, the best lineup on the floor was Marcus Carr, Courtney Ramey, Andrew Jones, Christian Bishop, and Timmy Allen. Those guys move without the ball and the offense flows. Now it's a smaller lineup. It's that, hybrid lineup where if the other team has a 6'10" big man like Kansas did, sometimes it's better to play a wiry 6'7" guy who can Wile E. Coyote it out of his hands when he brings the ball down. And I just saw magic with that group. Now, I get it. Sometimes you're going to take Andrew Jones out. You're going to put Trey Mitchell in. I'm fine with that, as long as Trey Mitchell is working in the paint. I don't need him shooting any more threes, even though he banked in that three with 55 seconds left to save UT's bacon. He banked in a three. Let me repeat that. He was 0 for 5 from three prior to that. And down low, he was unstoppable. He went to the free throw line and made 8 of 8 free throws because he was down low, doing the dirty work, great post moves. Kid has great offensive post moves. So I get it. There are going to be times you take Andrew Jones out, put Trey Mitchell in. But man, Dylan Dizu, it's not happening. I understand you got to get him some minutes, but just saying.
Play your best players. A good coach.
Play your best players now, because
Yeah.
now it's, we're kind of getting the roster down to the guys who are going to show up in the final 4 minutes of a close game, or in this past case, the final minute of a close game when Texas was down 4 and went on a 7-0 run to beat Kansas. And Courtney Ramey, big shout out to Courtney Ramey for face guarding Ochai Abaji, who's probably going to be the Big 12 player of the year. Face guarding him, held him to 11 points. Kid averages 20.8 a game. It was awesome what Courtney Ramey did. He sacrificed everything to face guard that kid for 38 minutes, excuse me. That's how long Ramey was in the game face guarding Abaji, but that was huge. So I'm going to love this. Taylor, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to love it from the stance of, as you kind of mentioned, you would hope that's the case. I mean, you don't want to see this team, be, because Iowa State, they were ranked too, right, when they played, I think.
Yeah, they were a falling ranked team.
Yeah. But to rebound though from that loss against Texas Tech, I mean, a 13-point loss on the road, that can be a confidence killer, especially for a team that is still kind of trying to find its way. And so I feel like the fact that Texas was able to respond and get the win against Iowa State, regardless of what has been going on with Iowa State, I still think that was substantial. I mean, they won by, what was it, 22 points, was it, that win? I mean, they held them to 41 points. That's a pretty dominant win right there. But then to follow it up and take down number 8 Kansas, you all signs, in my opinion, should indicate that this is the point where Texas is climbing back up, not staying middle of the pack or declining or anything. I feel like this should be a confidence boost, should be a back-to-back wins that should tell the team, hey, we are good enough to compete with some of the best teams in the country, especially with Kansas being down, as you mentioned, down by 4 in the last minute, still coming out with the win there. That's huge. And I think you shouldn't understate that in any way, shape, or form. So you hope that this is the case. So I'm going to go from the side of hope and say that I love this. But there is a part of me that wonders, I'm a kind of, let's see what happens. And I think that probably has to do with just the fact of the way that Texas basketball has gone for, the last several years.
For sure.
I feel like, it's hard to erase some of the.
How do you win the Big 12 tournament last season and turn around and lose to 14th seeded Abilene Christian?
Exactly. And so, yeah, those are hard memories to shake. So, I'm going to be positive and say that, yes, I'm going to love this, say that they cleared that mental hurdle, but it doesn't end there. They got to continue it, especially with some, pretty heavy hitters still left on the schedule with Baylor this weekend.
Well, and that Baylor game on Saturday it's going to be all about whether LJ Cryer, their leading scorer, plays or not.
Right.
I mean, he's been out 2 weeks with this foot injury ailment, and it's caused Baylor to really become a more inconsistent team. I get it. I mean, LJ Cryer, leading scorer on the defending national championship team, you lose him, that's a big deal. We'll see. There was talk of him playing Wednesday night against K-State, so we'll see how he's feeling on Saturday.
Yeah.
All right, love it or leave it. Numero trace.
My
That's
final
number 3 for you gringos out there.
Oh. My final love it or leave it for you is, no matter how dramatic the Texas athletic department gets, Auburn will always be more dramatic. Love it or leave it.
Thank God. Thank God Texas has Auburn. I mean,
Thank you.
I mean, literally.
Sanity. Keep some sanity
Oh
here.
my gosh. When people talk about the power brokers at a school getting involved, Auburn makes Texas look like a bunch of kittens. Um, Auburn's power brokers are the most impulsive, um, impatient, tempestuous I've ever seen. And right down to, firing Gene Chizik 2 years after winning a national championship for you. And you're constantly on this odyssey. And now Brian Harsin, okay, let's say he was involved with a PR staffer at the school. That happens everywhere, folks. It's when you want it to become an issue that you drag it out and use it to fire a guy. So now you've sort of put yourself on a bullet train to getting rid of Brian Harsin. Coaches don't want to coach there now because they don't know what his future is. I mean, it's a mess. So yeah, I'm going to love this. Auburn is always going to be, remember, I don't think, to my knowledge, Texas has not done this. But Auburn once got on a plane to go hire another coach while they had a coach. And that was Tommy Tuberville, who ended up going undefeated. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the guy they were going for was Bobby Petrino, who's like the biggest snake ever. So anyway,
Oh gosh.
I'm going to love this. Auburn, you always will make Texas look like a little basket of kittens. Taylor, love it or leave it.
I mean, yeah, I think you gotta love it because you're right. I mean, there's unfortunately a lot of times at a lot of different schools. It's not just Auburn. It's not. I'm not going to say anything about Texas or anything like that, but those type of relationships have been going on. I mean, they do, and I mean, look at the divorce rate of college coaches. I mean, shoot, I always feel bad for coaches' wives because they're never around. They're never around. It's not like the NFL where they have essentially an off season. They have what, maybe 3 weeks out of the year that college coaches actually get off from working because they have recruiting, they have camps, they have all of that type of stuff. So it is a lot more common than I think the general fan realizes. And it's unfortunate to say that. Like and I don't know all the details about what's gone down there. I don't know how much are rumors. I don't know how much are
And there are kids involved.
Yeah, there's families involved, there's children involved, and airing dirty laundry is never a good thing, especially if it's coming from people that support the university just to try to get a coach fired. I mean, come on, that's absolutely childish. That's absolutely ridiculous. And people that do that, I kind of want to be like, let's turn the camera around on you. Like, you're so quick to do this. Let's see what y'all have been doing here, because let's be honest, not like the Auburn athletic department has been spotless. Like, I mean, my goodness, they're Cam Newton, shoot, the quarterback that led them to a national championship. He was cheating the whole time. So you guys, and they
But
just,
he didn't know that his dad took 180,000 from
okay,
whatever.
yeah, I'm so sure.
Yeah, he took the money. I just didn't know about it.
That was all his dad. No, like, and that's a perfect sign. It's like, oh, they found the scapegoat so that they don't have to, they could highlight Cam Newton and make him. And he obviously was amazing at Auburn. Don't get me wrong.
Well, and
But
it's like the Lindsay Lohan defense, right? She gets pulled over. They find cocaine in her pants. She's like, "They're not my pants.
Yeah.
I borrowed them from a friend."
Right. Yeah. So yes, I'm gonna love it and say, Texas fans, they've got you beat, and that's a good thing. So let's not get to that level, because there's some things I think that you and I have known go down behind the scenes that I don't think many Texas fans would be too thrilled to hear about.
Well, I'll tell you what. Interesting week here on the Flagship podcast.
Yeah.
And next week will be, who knows what fresh developments we'll be talking about. We'll certainly have a Super Bowl to recap. So thanks everybody. And as Taylor said, get over to the Flagship podcast interview and listen to Ty Harrington, who is awesome. He's got a great voice. I'm like, you need to be doing every college baseball broadcast.
Seriously.
I mean, he's just a machine. He knows so much and he breaks it down in a great way. So check that out. Texas baseball's preseason #1, as Taylor said. They open the season on February 18th. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. As always, for Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.